Hey everybody, my name is Tom Caprel, and I am the owner of Hyperion Marketing. So we are a small marketing company in Chicago, and our focus is on helping small software, app, and game developers being able to sell their product and help the world see their dreams come to life. So today I'm going to be talking about marketing for your game, and I'm going to try to keep it at like 20-ish minutes and then have some time for questions. So start thinking of stuff as we go through. So I'm going to start really with 5 major points for marketing that I'd like to go over, and then some kind of just general anecdotes. Usually in my longer presentations, I have a bit more specifically about how to put together a better marketing plan, how to put together some other very specific things. But I think for now, we're going to leave it to just kind of some general points that I see more often than not are going to make a huge difference for just not only just game developers, but just small business people in general. And so we'll get started. So the first key point that I really want to talk about is the fact that marketing for games fundamentally relies on the community that you develop. So essentially, when you're putting your game out there, it's not necessarily going to be the amount of press releases that you do or the amount of social media posting that you do. It's really not about just throwing stuff into the void. What makes a huge difference is taking actions that are specifically related to developing your community in a really meaningful way from the moment you have the idea about your game, even as crazy as it sounds, before code goes down on the computer. Realistically, being able to have that community from the beginning is going to allow you to grow in ways that you may have never seen before, or may have seen other really successful developers go on. And part of that is because the community really latches onto it and makes it their own in a really beneficial way. And it's going to be really critical in a lot of ways to try to replicate that as much as you can in your own community that you're creating. Number 2, good marketing is really hard. So good marketing makes you ask really hard questions. And it's not hard necessarily in the ways that you might think. Marketing isn't like a magic spell. Like you put words in the right exact order and then bam, people are like gonna buy it because you said the right thing to them. That's not how it works. Realistically, it's hard because you have to be consistent. It's hard because you have to understand very deeply what you're creating and what you want to create and what the end goal is of where you're going. And oftentimes it can be really hard because when you're so close to something like that, right? I mean, this is something you're putting together. This is your baby. This is what you want. It's hard to be able to stand back and say, okay, well, what are the 2 or 3 points about this that everyone's going to pay attention to? Because in your mind, it's something that everyone should pay attention, all of the points of it, which totally makes sense. But there's only a very limited amount of time that people are going to be able to take a look at what you have to show them. And so being able to understand that in a very short period of time with a short sentence, a paragraph, a picture, that's hard. It also makes you ask really hard questions. And this is something I work with a lot of the developers that I talk to is, what do you want? Why are you making this game? What about it is going to be super beneficial to the community you're trying to go to? Why should people be interested? And those are hard questions, again, because this is something that you're personally invested in. And, it's hard sometimes too because it also, these hard questions also help you determine some really key things like where your game goes out. Like, for example, is this going to be an itch.io game? Is this going to be a game you're going to release on Steam? Is this going to be a game that you're going to put try to find a publisher for? Where do you think it actually sits in it? Do you think it really has what it takes to be able to go that far and build a community around it? Which is hard because it's again, everyone likes to think that yeah, of course my game does, duh. And I'm not saying that you have to look at your game as something that may not work, but you have to look at it through a critical eye. Because if you're building a retro indie style platformer with 8-bit graphics and 8-bit sound, I don't know how to tell you this, but it's going to be a lot harder than and it's going to be a lot different in the way that you're going to release something like that than it is if you were doing, experimental 3D game. And you have to be able to pay attention to that and understand that on a very deep level. Marketing requires a lot of consistency too. So especially as small developers and with small teams, and I've worked all the way from, with companies that, worked with companies that, deal in the Fortune 500. I've worked with small developers. I've gone back and forth. And it's really important to break down what you're able to do, what you have time to do, and what's going to be most beneficial. And the key thing behind that I always tell people is incredible amounts of consistency. And that really is posting and engaging. For example, social media is always a great example of that. It means posting and engaging all the time. And that means from a very early stage, again, sometimes even before code goes down, it's so critical for you to get out there and to show people what you're doing. So what does that look like though? Because content can be very diverse, right? How would you do that? And really what I like to tell people is there's so many different things that you can put together that are able to show what your game is. It's not just going to be, here's one sentence about what we're up to this week. Here's a new image from the game. It could be concept art. It could be an experience that you had. It could be a story that you had developing that you thought was funny. What else? It could be a soundbite from the game that you thought was really interesting. It could be a video of someone playing the game and their first reaction. It could be other games that you like. People want to understand the people behind the company and or the developer. Insert any name you want into that section. People really want to understand who you are and how you're different. And to do that, you really have to show them a broad array of things, and you have to be very consistent about it. And that's true even for regular media, or even for new media beyond social media, right? If you're working with content creators, they like to see that there's real progress, especially for games that are in beta for a long time. They really want to see that there's progress being made. And so that means consistent communication in a different way than maybe you're not. Maybe those are consistent developer blogs. It's kind of the most boring and most tedious part of marketing, I'm not going to lie to you. But it's also the part that's so incredibly critical because with so many options out there in the market right now, people want to know that you're as committed to this game as they want to be committed to enjoying it. And really for them to understand that they can, and really be excited about building a community underneath the property that you've created and the IP that you've developed, they have to trust that you care about getting it out and doing what you said you're gonna do, as much as they want to trust in the character relationships, or as much as they want to trust in the mechanics of the games not to suck. So it's really building that trust in a way that is incredibly beneficial. And this is something that touches so many different parts of marketing in so many different ways that it's absolutely critical. Number 4, games that are sold for money are products. They are also art. They can be both. I saw this discussion on Twitter the other day with people like, well, actually games aren't art, they're just products. And I'm like, no, they're both. You're a small business owner too. I mean, if you're taking in money, you have to have, unless you're doing it to your own bank account, which is probably really not a good idea, you're gonna have to create some sort of a corporation or incorporate in the state that you're in. You're gonna have to pay taxes on that money. And it's really important that you approach game development as a small business person. And a lot of people are really resistant to that, and I totally get it, right? Because you think small business person, you think a guy with, or like a startup owner, you think a guy with like a popped collar, like, yo, what's up, dude? I want to talk to you about my business. It's like Uber for lunch meat. It's so cool. Like, and you're just like, what? No. Like, but really when it comes down to that, what that means is that as a small business owner, you have to understand that there are so many critical pieces that any business has to do, especially one selling a product, like whether it's an entertainment product, whether it's a widget that you're creating, whether it's a new piece of art. Those are all still businesses in a lot of ways. And you have to approach it in that manner, which means that you have to have budgets for things. You have to be able to track how well things are going. You have to be able to take an approach that a business would take to the way that you're marketing your game, and even in some sort of the way that you're operationalizing your game. And by that I mean operationalizing the way that you approach either the development of your game, the marketing of your game. It touches every part of that. So what that looks like even beyond kind of just the basic level of having a company in place, doing the right sorts of things, talking to a lawyer at some point, which is very important. Especially if you're planning on building a lot of IP that's going to touch tons of people, you need to know what to do. There are other really important things to pay attention to with that, and I completely lost my train of thought. If you guys can't tell, I'm just going to keep saying it's really important over and over again. It's going to be great. No, but people have a certain expectation when it comes when a product is being delivered, even when it's in a beta form or even in alpha. They have a certain expectation of what that product is going to be at some point, and they have a certain expectation of completion. And there's a certain level of trust that goes with that. And for example, you don't see a Bluetooth speaker being sold out in the marketplace that's like half working and like has some features that you can download later. And games are very different in the fact that now it's almost games as a service, so you can do it in a very different way than you could before. But you also have to understand that there's also people are expecting a certain level of completion at some point, and you really have to commit to that, and you really have to market that in a way that's going to be really impactful. So I would highly encourage you to take a look at how marketing is done in other manners, not just games. So whether that's going to be consumable products like food, even how do people pay attention to that, because they're expecting a certain quality. How do you match that? So, and that one's a bit more abstract, but it's something different that I like to encourage people to think about, because I think people have an idea of what games marketing needs to be, and I'm going to do these things, and that's not always what marketing is. And number 5, bootstrapping doesn't mean a $0 budget, and in fact, it really shouldn't. At some point, you should spend some money on marketing. Whether that's going to be, you spend money on releasing a press release, because I'm not sure if you knew this, but sending a press release on the wire costs like $300. It's not cheap. Maybe you're going to be spending money on some basic advertising on Facebook. Maybe you're going to be spending some ads on mobile. Maybe you could be considering hiring a part-time marketing person to help with social media. Really, if you're committed to getting your game out there, there's so many important things that need to be done, and it's going to be focusing on where that money is going to be most impactful for you. And again, that's knowing from your consistency that you've been doing, where have people been responding, what's been really important. It's also knowing on the small business side, where can I spend that money? What does my budget look like? So these things are all tied together, and it's very important because oftentimes I talk to people, and at some point they're like, okay, we have this team of 5 people, and we're developing this really cool game, and people haven't really heard about it before, but we really just kind of want to get some free marketing that you can do. And you can do a ton of stuff for free now that there are things out there like social media that allows you to post as much as you want. You can post on YouTube as much as you want without any cost. But to really be effective, again, in marketing your product, sometimes you're going to have to spend money to find the things that are most beneficial and to fill in the gaps where you're not able to do that with your time. Because it's really got to be a time and money balance. And it depends on what your team's able to do. If you have a dedicated marketing person, you're probably going to spend either money on them or less money in general if they're volunteering for maybe a portion of profits or whatever, because they're going to have a ton of time to do that. If you don't have as much time, consider maybe that purchasing some help with that, or purchasing marketing or purchasing advertising is going to be an option. And I would leave a budget for that too when you're budgeting out what your game's going to be. So those are the 5 kind of key points that I wanted to go over. With the last 8 to 10 minutes, I'd like to go over some other really important things that aren't necessarily in a nice tight little list, as well as some other really critical things. So I kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think it's also incredibly important. Really share everything. Whether that's your own personal thoughts, whether that's a new character that you're thinking about, whether that's even new ideas that you're having for in audio in one area of the game. When you're generating a community, you're gonna, if they're actually interested, and actually it was funny, I just saw a talk about this like literally a couple hours ago. A really dedicated community is gonna want content faster than you're gonna be able to produce. So share as much as you can, because really people are gonna want to get hooked into that really, really deeply. And it's also going to be share everything in the sense that you need to share it in all the places where your audience actually is. So you need to pay attention. If you're making a fighting game, you need to know where the fighting game community hangs out. Are they on Reddit? Are they on, I was going to say NeoGAF, but that's not a good example anymore. Ugh. Are they on a forum somewhere that you may not know? Is there a specific fighting game forum? If you're making a platformer, where are the speedrunners, and where do they find new platformers to actually go after their game? you need to be able to share there, and you need to be able to share authentically there. So that means that you need to be able to build yourself into that community as well. So that's really sharing everything. Is not just content, it's also sharing in the places where people are. And it's very, very important to know that from a very early stage, because that's going to be a huge part of finding out, how does your audience react? Are they excited? Yeah, I also mentioned this again, but I really like to harp on it. Your goal should really be to develop an engaged audience, maybe even before you start coding. So those could be, some basic assets that you have for the game that you're excited about. It could be, basic sketches that you have put together. And one of the best ways that I've seen to do this is to, especially on social media, is to concentrate it around your studio as opposed to individual platforms for each game. Because if you're looking to build a game studio and you want to release more than one game, it's going to be really critical for you to build an audience that's going to follow you. And the easiest way to do that is to have a social media platform for your studio and then talk about each game individually on there. That way, for example, if you release, Super Mega Farmer 1 and have its own Twitter account, and then you're so excited for Super Mega Farmer 2, you're going to have to make sure all those people go over okay, follow our new account, you guys. It's going to be so cool. No one wants to do that. They want stuff. Once they join a community, they don't want to have to follow the community around. That's no fun. You want to present it to them in the easiest way possible. So building that is there's a lot of different ways to go about building that, but that's one key thing that I think is really important to make sure that they stay engaged, is to keep the platforms consistent too. This one's a bit more obvious now, but I like to continue to remind people that Let's Play videos don't equal sales, especially from Let's Players. There are examples where if you get people on YouTube, especially certain content creators, that there's going to be a certain boost. But oftentimes, some of the most popular Let's Play videos and some of the most popular Let's Play games never ended up in making any significant portion of sales back from those things. And that's kind of the myth of virality in general, especially now since kind of virality is kind of old. The only people that go viral, and this is going to sound crazy, but the only people that go viral are either extremely lucky or pay a lot of money for an advertising firm to make something viral. And realistically, the chances of you getting lucky, it's like winning the lottery. So never, ever count on it. You're going to make some mistakes too. In your marketing or in your communication. Really the key thing is to continue to build the trust that you have with your audience, and to be able to be okay with the fact that you made a mistake. You need to be honest about the fact that you made a mistake. Never do those half apologies. No one wants to hear those. I don't care if you don't think it's your fault. If you made a mistake, you need to own up to the fact that this mistake was made and just tell people how you're going to fix it. It's just like it is at work, right? Or if you work if you mess up, the only thing your boss really wants to know is how you're going to fix it, not necessarily what you did or what's going on. So that's really the key for that, and you need to be able to recreate that with your community, because they need to trust you and you need to be able to trust them too. And guess what? Sometimes you're going to say something stupid, or maybe you say something you had no idea is something that is really consequential, or accidentally ties into something you had no idea. Maybe you're making up a hashtag and you put that hashtag together. You're like, oh, this is great, not knowing at all that that hashtag was used in something crazy like 5 years ago. It's important to pay attention to that. It's also obviously you're going to do your research, but you have to own up to the fact that sometimes you're going to make mistakes. You're in a public setting, releasing a public product. That's okay. You're also going to get some crap too from people, especially being in public. And I certainly am not the best person to talk about this as a white dude in games with a beard. But I do have to say that there are ways you got to handle it as best that you can. And there are some of it too is the ability to prepare yourself for a public life. And if you're really committed to creating a public product, as unfortunate of the reality of what public life looks like, especially in games now sometimes, is you have to understand that as we work towards a better future, that the reality of what it is now is still something that you're going to have to deal with. And that's really hard, and I totally understand that. And I mean, as much as I can, obviously. But I really want to remind people of the importance of understanding of what you're going after if you are creating something like that. Because it is a real commitment, and it is a real understanding that obviously there's going to be times you interact with people that just don't like what you make. That, if you're in public, there's going to be times where people see something and go, oh, that's dumb, I don't get it. And you're like, okay, thanks, and whatever. And then there's going to be times where people do things that are actively bad. And you have to be able to handle those situations differently as well, because your audience has to trust the fact that not only can you moderate that, as much as you can, but that you can differentiate the difference. You can differentiate that. So another thing too, and obviously since you guys are here in a community, this is kind of a moot point, but it is something I do like to continue to say. Really continue to network as much as you can, because there are so many marketing tips or even just general game things that I've seen that make such a huge difference when people engage with each other. And I, obviously you guys are taking an awesome step by being here. This is, I know this is only the first year of this, but continue to make sure that you're together in that community as much as you can. And be tight with that community, because that's really what's going to help you figure out some of the most difficult struggles that you're going to have in that is who's done that, who's had experience with this, and ask those questions. That's so critical, because oftentimes you're not going to find the right answer, maybe for you, for your community, or maybe even the type of game that you have online. There aren't a ton of resources for that. And really, since the budget for marketing, especially in small companies, is very low, any time you can do, you can spend doing marketing is potential sales. And it really is a guerrilla marketing, right? So you're putting together as much as you can on social media. You're creating as much content as you can on your developer blog. You put together a new website. You're sharing as much as you can. Any more time that you can associate to that is going to make a difference for you. And that's where the being consistent comes in. You need to make time to do that. And whether that means you put it in your schedule, whether that means you have monthly meetings to make sure everyone's on track, put in place methods to make sure that that's really consistent. And that's incredibly important to make sure that you stay that way, because it is super easy. And I've even done this, don't get me wrong. I can tell you right away, I am not the best at this in so many ways, where it was the saying, the cobbler's kid has no shoes or something like that. Like, I've done this myself on several occasions where you're like, oh, I haven't posted in a while. You look back, you're like, oh, it's been 2 months. Okay, cool. Like, you need to make sure that doesn't happen as much as possible. So one of the things I wanted to cover here just a little bit. So how do you get help with marketing? There's a couple things. Couple of really important points I want to go over, and this is something that people ask me a lot, is, okay, so I think I have a team of this size, I think I have this going on, what does that look like? So I always suggest that people get help with marketing when they have a team of over 5 people, because it usually means a certain size of game and a certain goal that they're trying to put together. It means that realistically you might need some help at that point. If you've been funded at all, so if you've raised money, whether that's through Kickstarter, whether that's through investors, that's another key point. Make sure that there's some money laid out for marketing in there, right? If you're negotiating a deal with a publisher, this is another key part, and this is actually something I had recently where I was talking to a group who was about to kind of sign this publisher contract, and they're really excited. And a lot of it had to do with marketing, right? Because sometimes publishers are fully on the development side, sometimes it's development and marketing, sometimes it's development and investment in marketing, or sometimes it's a combination of all that, right? And they had this big marketing side, but nothing at all was specified. So they were about to sign a contract that literally said, like, yeah, we'll market your game. Okay, what does that look like? So oftentimes, essentially what you have to do is go in and be able to have someone who understands, okay, here's what a good contract should look like, and here's exactly what should be outlined in the marketing portion of this, because the last thing you want to do is accidentally sign away either your rights to the game or some terrible marketing that's going to go on, and they'll do 3 tweets and call it that, and all of a sudden you're out any potential sales you could have had because your publisher's not doing what they said they're going to do. You need to make sure to be able to have somebody there to help you out with that. If your game's getting major press, so if you've been picked up by any of the major, if you're picked up by Kotaku, Polygon, and a couple other things, yeah, like you probably need some help at that point to manage, because realistically you're going to be seeing a larger community come in. Or for example, if you blow up on Reddit, it's going to be really important that you have some help with that to make sure to manage that community effectively, whether that's going to be from just a pure marketing standpoint or community management. The next one is if you're releasing on more than one platform. I know that seems kind of silly because oftentimes you release on several platforms at once, but there are very specific ways you should approach marketing on each platform, and very specific ways that people expect you to engage on all of those platforms, and it's really important to know that. So you can do your research and probably figure it out yourself, but being able to have the time to do that and being able to have the time to actually execute on that is something that not a whole lot of small teams have the ability to do. If you're making any type of mobile game, that's really critical, because mobile is so unbelievably inundated right now. I spent 5 years in the mobile app industry. I was a part of a B2B company that built apps for Fortune 500 companies. And oh man, even there, it is so inundated, I can't even tell you. And games even beyond that. So if you are considering that, you need to really have a completely different marketing approach than even you would have 5 or 6 years ago. And finally, if you've already had a successful game, if you had one game that's a success, doing the same thing for your next game may not necessarily guarantee you success in any of those ways. Your community might have changed. Your new game may not necessarily resonate with them in the same way, and you need to be able to know that and be able to have the ability to understand that, and being able to retroactively not only just pay attention, but be able to understand where you need to go and what tactics you need to take now that you've had one is incredibly critical. So. And that's it. So thank you, everybody. So we're going to go for questions now, and you can also, if we don't get you questions, you can also ask me actually, you can ask me outside after this because I'm going to be at the next panel. But you can also ask me on Twitter or email. So I saw your hand first.
So the marketing department that I currently work with, they spend a lot of time and effort on kind of downstream looking at A/B testing and sort of trying out, experimenting with the feature and seeing empirically how it does versus sort of upstream working with like market research. Where would you invest your time and money with just kind of A/B testing and experimenting, or really doing more upfront research?
Yeah, that really depends on where you are for example, in games specifically, it depends entirely on where your community is. Before you get started with things, it's really important to do that top-down research in the beginning. And as you have an established community, it's much more important to start to iterate on your messaging there. So whether that is going to be A/B testing on emails, whether that's going to be posting different things on social media, trying video versus photos. Again, it's really just experimenting to see what resonates most and what people like to see the most. But that's really the part, because if you're iterating and A/B testing when you have like 15 people on your email list, nobody like that. No, really, honestly, and to get actual good A/B testing numbers, you need to have a minimum email list of 10,000 people. Seriously, and I know that's like, wow, that's so many people. Yeah, but that's the only way you're going to actually get statistically significant numbers, because if you have 2 people click on your email versus 4 people, that doesn't tell you which one's actually better. It really, because that's not super significant. So, was there another question? Go ahead.
Yes, I recently started doing social media management for a smaller company I'm with. And I'm wondering if you could talk to the point of what ratio you should be doing for retweeting, creating your own content, how often you should be doing call to actions for certain things, and at what point are you posting too much?
Sure. I think so. Especially on Twitter, because I think that's a key area where people find new people a lot. A half-life of a tweet is only 24 minutes. So if you post 48 times a day, that's probably too much. But realistically, you could get away with posting 5 or 6 times a day and not have to worry about that. I would spend most of it's really important you share your own stuff and throw it out into the void as much as possible. So that's going to be, posting your things as much as you can. So that's 5 or 6 times a day. Again, this is at the terminal most, right? This is not ideal because realistically you don't have that kind of time. But a huge portion of that, over 50%, should be engaging with other people on social media. There's so many people out there who just throw things out into the void and then do nothing beyond that and expect the attention to come to them. You really need to engage with those communities as much as you can. So, another question? Do you? Yeah.
I was just wondering, I saw metrics saying like 94% of most advertising happen on Facebook or effective advertising. I was wondering, with that being the case, would you recommend like for startups that really don't have a lot of money to spend, would boosting posts be a pretty good option to try to get your game in front of people?
Yeah, I mean, Facebook the two things I'd pay attention to, and again, it depends on where you are, but if you're on mobile, use mobile advertising. If you're on Facebook, or if you're on anything else, I would use Facebook. Facebook in particular has some of the best and most powerful tools for reaching people, and it actually still has the best return on investment for now. I would focus on that if you're considering advertising, and particularly social media advertising. I would consider that, but also you have to take a look too with what the cost is of other advertising as well, whether that's banner ads, web ads, that sort of thing, because it depends on what community you're going for, because there are still some benefit to actual just regular web ads, but not as much as there used to be. So, any more questions? Go ahead.
Hi, so I have a question with a mobile game. I think I understand what, people that play video games all their life, what they're looking for. But when it comes to people that are, commuters or business people that just have, maybe a few minutes in a day to play a game, how do you market towards that kind of audience?
Yeah, so it's more like what people would consider the casual audience. Yeah, it's really, you really have to approach them how they're used to being advertised to. So again, hardcore gamers have a certain expectation of what that advertising and again, I'm not using advertising in big A advertising, but as in little a advertising, kind of just same thing as marketing. People have an expectation of what that looks like, right? And so you need to be able to find out what those people are actually interested in and what draws them to the game that normally they wouldn't play games for. If they're playing on a very casual sense, maybe a couple hours, what does that look like? Why are they there? What do they get out of it that's different than a hardcore gamer? And then even beyond that, how can you use that money how can you use that information to help monetize that as well? And then those obviously tie into each other, and that's like 3 presentations in and of itself. So. Hope that answered your question, and I think that's it, because now we're about to do a panel, which I'm also on. So, all right, thanks, guys.